So why is everyone ignoring the elephant in the room that prevents it from being a housing crash? What is an elephant in the room, and why is there an elephant in the room? Let's talk about that. I'm Bill Gross. This is my weekly real estate report. So I would say, and I'm going to cue here to the fancy graphic. I would say there's an elephant in the room when we talk about real estate and housing overall. What is that? An elephant in the room means there's a major issue that nobody's really talking about. And when we talk about possible housing crashes, we talk about affordability issues, we talk about homelessness, there's an obvious factor, which is there's only so many houses. And while there's a building industry, it's an insignificant part of the total. You know, in any other business, when there's a demand for product, industry can create more products. So there's a demand for toilet paper, people can print more toilet paper. There's a demand for toys, people can, develop and create more toys. They can make more cars. There's a startup process, but eventually it catches up. But in my lifetime, we've never even come close to catching up in housing. Our population has grown much faster than the housing stock, particularly in impacted areas like California and Los Angeles. And as long as that's true, as long as there's way more people than houses, you cannot have a housing crash. Well, let's get into the details on that. Take a look at the graph showing the population growth over time. This would be the increase of population each year, and you can see the housing stock has never closed that gap. Oh, it's getting closer in most recent years as our population growth has slowed down. As countries get wealthier, they have less kids. And of course, we have illegal immigration and other immigration that will add to the population with people leaving as well. But we have years of unmet demand for housing. We've never had as many houses as buyers willing to buy them. As long as that's the case, take, for example, the numbers we talked about in the last few years as far as the market. A year ago, at the peak of the market, we'd have 11 offers per house. Well, if housing demand is cut in half, instead of 11, you only have 5 offers per house. That's still 5. That's still, if one can't qualify, 4 more people are there ready to go. And if 2 can't qualify, there's 3 more ready to go. In fact, in today's market, still about 20% of all homes sell at or above the list price. There's still competitive pressures on the market, causing kind of a floor on where markets can go. Now, the main statistics I've always maintained are twofold. One, mortgage rates. Last week we had a little whipsaw. We had dropped down to below 6% marginally at 5.99, and then immediately jumped back up again and closed the week at 6.19. But you can see the rates have stayed in the range of 6.2% over the year-to-date period, the last few months. And while they ran up as high as 7.25, 7.37 back in October, and at that time, pundits were saying rates were increasing. And remember, I talked about that back then, that they were using this to project a never-ending spiral. Well, that's not happened. In fact, the opposite is true. The market has come back and corrected a bit. That's not to say it's good at 6%. That's not to say it won't continue to go down or go back up again. But it certainly has not spiraled out of control. It's been in the 6.2 range. Still very affordable by historic standards, any way you slice it, especially given the population we have today. The second major factor that will always prevent a housing crisis or people cutting prices dramatically to get rid of excess inventory is inventory. And you can see that you can barely see it because it overlaps last year so nearly, that this year's numbers are almost the same as last year's. And while inventory is significantly higher than a year ago, which I would call that the peak pandemic period of all time, you can see eventually it came back up. It's still below all historic standards. This current year is still below every pre-pandemic period, 2020, 19, and 18 on record. It's still the lowest inventory. And as long as you have few houses, then a seller will always get a price fairly close to the prior price because the demand is still there for the housing. So those are the 2 key factors to always watch. In fact, here's another great graph that Redfin did that shows it maybe a little more graphically. Here's the pandemic period last year, and inventory went up, and seasonally, I mean by the seasons of the year, they go up a little bit. But even at its height last year, it's below all recorded history pre-pandemic. Let me show you the graph again. I'm sorry, I missed that. Here's the peak of 2022. And that's still below every single record pre-pandemic forever. And so and of course now the inventories come down below where it was at the peak last year. And so we have so little housing, it's almost impossible for there to be a housing crisis. Here's Los Angeles statistics, homes for sale. Again, last year in the summertime, inventory went up a bit. And there's a lot of news about, inventory is rising out of control. No, inventory was approaching a more normal level and then dropped again. And by all standards is at the all-time low other than this brief period during the peak of the pandemic. And even the height last year, the summer, is below all recorded history. But this blip, and I'm not sure what this is, but other than this one period in 2012, I'm not sure what the historic issues were in the data perhaps. But certainly the last 5 years. So with so little housing on the market, it's difficult to imagine there to be a bidding war for sellers to lower prices. Another factor I look at very carefully is the price per square foot. This is what buyers are paying for a square foot of a house. And Altos Research does a great job breaking into 4 price points based on different type of houses: 5 bedrooms, 3 bathroom, 3 bedroom, 3 bath, 3 bedroom, 2 bath, 3 bedroom, 1 bath, the 3 most common market segments in our market. And you can see that the housing stock has continued to go up slightly per square foot. This goes back over the last 3-year period, but you can see that at the highest price point, 1013 versus 1147, still up 10% over that time period. And the lower price points from 422 to 539, so up about 28% over that 3-year period. So what you buy, what you get for a square foot of house, apples to apples, has almost continuously inched up at a fairly steady rate. So as long as the demand is there like that, it's hard to imagine there being a crash in the marketplace. But, of course, the real estate industry news has to write something to get your attention, to distract you, I think, to buy your time and then sell it to other people. So I have 2 examples I think are misleading. One is Realtor.com, and here's their senior economist. What's it mean for home buyers and sellers in the housing market? He talks about, his headline is, home prices continue to slow in November 2022. Now, that might have been in November 2022. That's 3 months ago. Here we are in February. And this article comes out January 31st. So it's 3 months old data. So here's an economist telling you, well, what happened 3 months ago was this. How's that going to help you going forward? How is that a headline? How is that news? Now, if you want to say, well, we're going to go back and review and compare to our predictions back then, well, they don't want to do that. That's not what he's doing. He's telling you that it slowed, I think, because that headline, I think they believe, will get attention. Oh, housing prices slowing? No, they slowed in November. And slowing doesn't mean decline. Slowing means they slowed. So to me, that's a very misleading article this is in Realtor.com by their senior economist. But the raspberry of the week, there's a service called RealTrends.com. It's a paid news service. And they have a podcast, and they interviewed Zillow's chief economist. Her name is Skylar Olson. Now, I don't want to knock Skylar. She's an economist. She didn't write the headline. She was just interviewed. It's really Real Trends taking her information and misapplying it. But I think she's out of her lane when she talks about these things, like a lot of economists. One of the challenges is we have economists and scientists who make political decisions, in this case, sales decisions. It's one thing to say where the market's headed or why. It's another thing to tell salespeople how they should talk to home buyers and sellers. And why do I say that? Well, Zillow used to be focused on data. They were the original data analysts in the real estate industry. The book by the founder of Zillow called Real Talk, I think Rewriting the Rules of Real Estate, is one of the best books ever written. Back then, Zillow was a data company. Today, they're just a big advertising company. And so here you're the economist who's training salespeople on how to talk to home buyers and sellers, not talking to home buyers and sellers. Remember, if you're a seller or buyer, you're going to Zillow directly. She's not talking to home buyers. She's not talking to home sellers. She's telling real estate agents how they should talk to home buyers and sellers. That seems odd to begin with. What's even more odd is her resume. Again, might be the world's greatest economist, seems to have a very impressive resume within the world of economists, to some degree, I guess. I don't know. But has never sold a house, at least based on her resume, no experience in sales. And so be careful when you have these articles telling you as a realtor how you should act when people don't know what they're doing or have never actually done it. And in this case, here's an economist who should be talking to her clients theoretically. Isn't it interesting? Buyers and sellers, but in reality, is talking to the news company about how realtors should talk to the buyers and clients. To me, that's the raspberry of the week that RealTrends should know a little better. In fact, let's read a little bit of the article from that RealTrends has. I thought it was fascinating when you read this. Here's how RealTrends and how Zillow wants you to talk to your sellers and buyers. Mortgage rates are determined in a financial market. They're about as predictable as stocks. They're certainly very volatile right now, and they can, of course, be very stressful. But we're starting to see some recent trends of mortgage rates coming down. It's funny, we're actually in a macro environment where bad news is good news. It's kind of a little freaky. That's an economist speaking, a little freaky. We're starting to see wage growth come down, and that's great news for inflation. Well, it's great news for inflation, but if your wage is going down, not good news for you. You've got signals on other prices coming down. So I don't know, is that how you talk to buyers or sellers? Or if you're a buyer and seller, is that how you want to be talked to? Put your comments in the chat box. I'd love to see what you think of that. Personally, it's gobbledygook. It's not economic. And I think one of the constant themes I find in the news is it's a good thing when people suffer and lose their jobs or the wages go down is good for everybody else. I don't think it's a healthy economy. I don't think it's a healthy way to do business. I think we want to help everybody, show them a path forward rather than say it's a good news people are suffering and here's how to take advantage of it. What do you think? As always, though, the most important question is what's best for you? Is it a good time for you to buy or for you to sell? If I can help, call me, text me, email me. I'm on social media at BillGrossEXP. You have my contact information down below. And as always, make today your best day ever.